Hello and welcome. My name is Zafar Iqbal and you're watching the Mojo Story. For years, we as journalists have been covering important events, political rallies, visits by top leadership of the country, including the Prime Minister, but rarely one comes across an order that asks journalists to get a character certificate for covering a visit. That's precisely what's happened now. A report by India Today said that all journalists were asked to produce a character certificate for access and security passes to cover Prime Minister Narendra Modi's day long visit to Himachal Pradesh. Now, the report, quoting an official notification, said that not just privately owned print, digital, and news television journalists, even representatives of the state run media, including the All India Radio and Doordarshan, have been asked to bring certificates of character verification. But now the DG of Himachal Pradesh has tweeted and said that all journalists are welcome to cover the Prime Minister's visit, and police will, in fact, facilitate the coverage. To discuss this, we're joined by an eminent panel. We're joined by Madhavan Narayanan, senior journalist. We're also joined by PKD Nambiar, political activist, and PK Jain, who's a former IPS officer. If I can start with you, Madhavan, you've been a veteran journalist. Have you come across such an order ever asking journalists to produce a character certificate?
The last time I heard that term was when I was passing out of school, not even college. In fact, today I met an old friend of mine and we were laughing over this. He says, who should we go to? School teachers? And this was just before the withdrawal order came from Himachal Pradesh. Let me put the record straight. Curbs on media freedom is not really new. During I was a schoolboy during the emergency when we saw uh, you know, a complete clampdown on media, including journalists being jailed. But I thought we had put that behind in 1977 after the end of the emergency. But then we also saw the Bihar press bill a few years later, during Indira Gandhi's time when Jagannath Mishra, who was the chief minister, tried to put journalists in jail for Bihar. This thing. Then in Tamil Nadu, we also had this bizarre case of the editor of a respected magazine, Anand Vikatan, being jailed for a cartoon because it alleged corruption by MLAs in general, may name no
Yeah,
one,
yeah.
and the editor happily submitted to 1 day in jail because that was based by the privileges committee of the assembly of the state. Then we had the defamation bill under the Rajiv Gandhi government, which was, in fact, I remember taking part in a march. It was led by press barons like Ramnath Goenka. It was an unusual case of, those were the 80s when the journalist unions were used to fight their own company owners and management. But it was a rare
Uh,
case where journalists, editors, and, rank and file and barons, everybody
yeah.
matched together. So curbs on media is not unknown at all. But uh, taking a prior certificate from a CID for me is not only unprecedented. For me, I want to think beyond the incident today because this might be forgotten in a week because it's been withdrawn and it's only by a state government and not the central government. But Zafar, I want to bring this note, take this occasion to mull over or ponder over the state of media awareness in this country. Meaning, if journalists are the fourth estate, so to speak, or if we
Right.
are media is an institution, as you
Yeah.
know, uh, like the judiciary or legislature or executive, do we have a standing at all in this country? Legally, we don't have too much of a standing, honestly speaking, because India's media free, unlike the US, which has a First Amendment in the Constitution,
Yeah.
which protects the freedom of the press specifically. In India, the freedom of the press is implicit in the freedom of right to speak or right of
Yeah.
speech or
Yeah.
freedom of
Yeah.
expression.
Yeah.
And therefore, it is a matter of concern that as it is, then there is a constitutional shortfall, and now made more complicated by the fact that anybody with a smartphone is a citizen who can sound like a journalist. There's
Yes.
fake news. So this kind of
Anybody,
illicit,
yes,
yeah,
anybody is a broadcaster now with a
yeah,
smartphone in
exactly.
hand,
Now,
and with,
why am I
yeah,
stating this context to you? Because if there is a lack of institutional awareness of journalism as a profession, it is an independent profession. If there is a
Right.
lack of awareness of the institutional nature of the media, news media, then what? And this order that has been withdrawn must have passed to the officer of an at least an IPS officer, not below.
Yeah.
It must have.
Obviously, it's come from the police. But PKD, why should journalists be asked to produce a
No, no. Let
character
me,
certificate? Yeah. Please quickly,
Zafar, I want to
Madhavan.
complete this
Yeah,
because
yeah,
this is a statement of not, I'm not discussing facts. I'm talking
yeah,
the fact that there is an institutional crisis in this country. If
yeah.
uh, if an IPS officer is so illiterate, I would like to see action against this IPS officer, because if he doesn't understand there is something called a character certificate needed for a media, it shows a gross illiteracy of constitutional values, or where there's a press council as an established institution where the Supreme Court has pronounced on cases like this. So this is a serious case. In fact, I would like to turn the tables and say action must be taken against the any officer who took like this, because it shows the illiteracy of institutional proceedings.
Yeah, yeah. Action must be taken against the person who actually asked journalists to give a character certificate. But why should journalists produce a character certificate, PKD, for covering a prime minister visit? It's not the first time we've been covering prime minister's visit for years altogether. It's not new.
I am absolutely against that the very concept of character certificate, and for that matter, in any profession, we should not be asking for it. Forget about journalists. One thing I wanted to tell you, that I interact with journalists, a lot of people. I employ a lot of journalists, but one thing I can tell you, they are also not above anybody else. I think that kind of a set of narrative that yes, they are above everyone, that is also not true. But I what I have been told, or I what I know, is that in a prime minister's program are generally being covered by the PIB registered journalists. And in if that kind of an established norm is already there in place, asking for a character certification is a very unwarranted. I believe that there no government could have ever taken this decision. It must be, as Madhavanji said, that it must be a bureaucratic adventurism, or maybe a miscommunicated effort. That is the reason the government immediately course corrected it. And I think, and second, and most importantly, is that Narendra Modi as a prime minister is supposed to be a very, very media savvy, very highly communicative prime minister India ever had. We never had a prime minister, maybe we never had a prime minister in the social media era of like this, because before that it was Manmohan Singh, who was not very great with communication. But here is a prime minister who would like to be seen 24 by 7. He is available at least 16 hours. We all know that he is working in front of all of us. And I don't think that
So,
with the awareness of prime minister's office, or by the central government, or even by the state government, this could not have happened. This may be a bureaucratic adventurism, and I'm sure that since it is involved with the prime minister's program, they may be conducting some kind of their own survey, or an inquiry which needs to be addressed, so that this misadventurism should not be happening in the times to come. One last point.
yeah.
One of the most important thing is that there is, as Madhavanji said, that institutionalized media is slowly dying down, or those people are also not anymore behaving like an institution. They all are going around all across and just looking at more than news. They wanted to become a news maker, so they are trying to
Well,
create news rather than the.
no, I don't know what does that mean, PKD. Really, I can't understand that not covering the news, but becoming a news for covering a prime minister's visit. But we can go to PK Jain. PK Jain, one can understand you have been a police officer. There are security concerns, and when there's such a high-profile visit, nothing can be left for chance. But those are security concerns. Here we are talking about a character certificate.
Yeah, hi Zafar, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yeah, see, this is a matter where I think some over enthusiastic officer, I don't know at what level this goof up has happened, but it has
Yeah.
happened. At some level, some over enthusiastic officer has issued this kind of a guideline. Let me be very clear about three things. The PM security is sacrosanct. Now, as far as
Yes.
the PM's programs are concerned, public rallies are concerned, we only give access to the reporters who are already having an accreditation card with them.
Yeah,
So the
yeah,
people who are the reporters who have got accreditation cards, they are already verified and they are allowed access to the prime minister, even to his personal press conference. Whereas,
yes,
there could be there are n number of people who are masquerading and who want to get entry to the venue by showing their own newspaper issued card, which 99% of the time, at least in Maharashtra, we never accepted. We said that if you have to cover the program of the prime minister from a close quarter, then you require the accreditation card. If you want to cover the program from a distance and be a part of the crowd or be a
yeah,
part of the press gallery, etc., then probably even the press card would be accepted,
yeah.
provided the person was known to somebody in the setup.
Mm.
So I this kind of a thing that they must bring a character certificate, etc., is probably an extension of that thinking. Now the SP must have told one of his juniors that you issue instructions like this. The idea would be probably to have accreditation cards, and somebody instead issued an order saying that they must get a
No,
character certificate.
but it's very clearly written, the character
No, I know, I know.
certificate.
As I said,
Yeah,
some goof up has taken place somewhere. These are the instructions which can never be issued by the government. It can never be issued by the senior police officers. Somewhere the goof up has happened, and they've fortunately corrected it. And this kind of a thing cannot be done. The prime minister cannot be kept away from the press, and the press cannot be kept away from whatever the prime minister has to talk to the people. So this is, I mean,
yeah.
I don't know how it has happened, but I believe the course correction has been done, and already the opposition parties are jumping on it and they are criticizing the prime
Yes.
minister, or maybe so this becomes more political than actually because of somebody's mistake down the line. As Mr. Madhavan has said that action must be taken against the SP. As I said, yes, inquiry should be conducted, responsibility should be fixed. But I only it has put the entire government and the government machinery in a very bad light. So somebody has to pay for it. I'm sure that that action would be taken.
Somebody has to pay for it, and action
Somebody
need
has
to
to
be
pay for
taken.
it. See, we
Yeah.
cannot. You saw
Yes.
sometime back in Gujarat, you saw some in Punjab, you saw that the prime minister was stuck on the flyover for such a
Road.
long time.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
this kind of a thing, if you ask me, in Maharashtra, that officer, SP level or whoever was in charge of that bandobast would have gone home by now. So it is only a question of how seriously the government takes this kind of a gaffa. But it has to be taken cognizance of, and some action must
Yeah.
be taken so that nobody makes a mistake like this ever again.
Cognizance must be taken. But Madhavan, when we cover Prime Minister's visit as accredited journalists, I think it's just enough. They have got a list of the accredited journalists. They just check. Even they know us by our. They have been seeing our coverage. They know us very well, and we have an accreditation card, and that was enough. But now, do you think it's just a error that has happened, or uh, it's deliberately going overboard and trying to put in more strict measures to control journalists while they are covering an important VVIP visit?
Let me say this, Zafar. I see this as an error of omission, not an error of commission.
Yeah,
What it means is that probably somebody had the back of my mind or back of his mind something like a security clearance certificate, but
hmm,
called it a character certificate because
character
general illiteracy is not uncommon in India. You need
yeah,
not see a conspiracy in everything. It can be a
yeah,
simple case of incompetence because the
yeah,
way it has been ad hoc introduced and arbitrarily introduced and ad hoc withdrawn shows that it
yeah,
might be a classic case of casual inefficiency and incompetence, which is very common in India increasingly because we are used to old world IPS and IAS officers, but there has been a general pervasion of mediocrity in India. That is one thing. Let me also
yeah.
add at this juncture that I have covered G20 summits, I have covered the heads of state visit, I have covered Queen Elizabeth's visit to India in '97 at close quarters. So I am pretty familiar with a lot of the security procedures, and there are two things I want to say. As Mr. Jain said, accreditation committees sit to clear journalists based on established organizations and track record, which is perfectly fine because it doesn't deny the freedom of press. It only limits the privileged access, which, because it's in short supply, the government has every right to lay down some rules and follow the criteria. The second thing, security is important. I have covered Israeli prime ministers in India, and I know that it was fascinating to cover the Israeli prime minister because the security detail is extremely efficient and yet so polite that even when they are frisking you, they do it so well that you almost feel you're being welcomed. And I have seen the SPG in the PMO's office in at least three prime ministers, if not more. and the SPG was extremely well trained. So let us not blame all of the government apparatus for this. We still have institutional practices. We still have excellent IPS officers and IAS officers. I'm not going to go overboard. And I also agree with PK Nambiar that journalists are also accountable. Except that let us not confuse democratic accountability with administrative accountability, because that is where the nuance lies. Journalists
Yeah,
are not administratively accountable to the government or
yeah.
to the private sector. We are a unique beast which has got to be maintaining equidistance from both private sector as well, because sometimes we are accused of being the baron's handmaiden, somebody sometimes of the government's lapdog or the watchdog, and all kinds of journalists. And it is
Yeah,
this diversity that makes a democracy live. But
yeah,
let us be very clear. I am back to my point one, which is that
yeah,
there is a general state of a poor understanding of journalism as an news media as an institution, and we need to evangelize that, and we need to take that forward so that people, even when mistakes are made, people know where the mistakes are. It's not as if mistakes don't happen. Wall Street collapses because of mistakes. Governments fall because of mistakes. But whenever mistakes take place, look at the way the British government has taken a U-turn on tax laws. So it's not as if the British who rolled over India for 150 years can't make mistakes. They make big ones too. So when they do that, the beauty of institutional procedures, as Mr. Jain might show, when you are in a service, you know exactly what the details are. And that
yeah.
sense of detail and the conceptual knowledge of the Constitution and its values must be driven home, because otherwise we'll be back to the 16th century, where we think we are riding horses and there is a Senapati and everybody says Johar to the government. No, sorry. If you're going to abolish dynasty, welcome. You're going to abolish, ancient things. Let's get modern. Let's understand what the media is all about.
Well, that's an important point. But I was also wondering that now that it was asked that please produce your character certificate, how would have a journalist responded? Who would give him a character? Who can, decide on the character of a person till the time the order was withdrawn? But PKD, clearly, the opposition had jumped on this issue. We got statements from the Congress and the Aam Aadmi Party.
A democracy and a multi-party democracy, people are looking for an opportunity, and they will use the opposition will use and misuse as much as they can. See that we are even debating it, whereas we know that it has already been cancelled. That order was been taken back,
Yeah,
but we are still debating it. So that's the beauty of our democracy, I think. But then the larger question is that there is the social media has empowered everyone to become a journalist. So the today's journalists are not all those institutional journalists of like an X, A, B, C, D, or E. The only
yeah,
thing is that with this, there is a large amount of people. The one who has got a mobile, uh, you don't even require a pen and paper. A mobile is a journalist, and he will say that I
yeah.
have a YouTube channel or a social media channel. I think it's an
Uh,
evolving thing, and the mainstream media is slowly going, also moving away from the traditional practices, which of course Madhavanji will have. It's really hard for all the veteran journalists to digest that, and but I see it every day how the media as an industry is evolving, or evolving for good or bad, we don't know. But it's a very tough time, and no government in a democracy can ever talk about giving character certificate. And why I have an issue of making this has got, you remember, Narendra Modi is the first prime minister in India who has asked for no more certification by attestation by anybody. Remember, yes, you and me as a kids used to go to even our 10th certificate and 12th certificate, to everything, even for a passport, we need to go to somebody for an attestation. A prime
yeah,
minister who took away that complete culture of the gazetted officer. Today, nobody talks about who is a gazetted officer. We don't even know whether he is a gazetted officer or not a non-gazetted officer. It doesn't matter, because the only reason why we always used to think of that gazetted officer, because he is the only one who can sign your every attest all your copies, true copies. So the self
yeah.
attestations, the self character certification is a norm which Narendra Modi has introduced. So I may not be able to believe, or I can't believe the fact that it is even at the top rank officers or even the government maybe may not be even aware. As Mr. Jain said, it's very true that it could be a bureaucratic adventure of a junior officer or a mid-level officer who may have, maybe it could be even a typo error of the word, but then of course we know that we have a vibrant media. We always wanted to have something or the
Okay.
other new thing, and I think leave it there. We are a vibrant democracy, and our
Okay.
media is so vibrant. We are taking, we and at least this shows the power of media. The media and the democratic value and the righteousness is still available. I think that is the beauty of this discussion.
Okay. Before I go to PK Jan, Madhavan, you want to quickly come in?
Yes, I think I take PK Nambiar's point on many things, but I want to mention that this whole gazetted officer's signature has been mainly done away with thanks to things like the Aadhaar card, which Nandan Nilekani, who started, and it's been continued by the Modi government, which is a very good practice. So that actually becomes a master attestation. So it because if you already have an Aadhaar card, that means you're already an attested citizen. So that dramatically reduces the need for some of these things, which is a progressive thing. But I must also say that this is a unique case because you must also understand. There is a Tamil proverb which says that if you sit under a palm tree and drink milk, people think you're having liquor. So so the same thing applies. If in a contextual sense, if a government is seen to be inimical to certain practices, when even the flimsiest of incidents take place, there is a tendency to assume this is a willful action. So I think that has to be borne in mind by any government, that it's not only important to be well intentioned, it is important to be perceived in such a way so that there is a body of evidence to show that it's unlikely that you do this. So maybe there's a lesson for all of us,
Yeah.
including the media, because the media also needs to know that it's not the be all and end all of everything, that we are well aware of now worldwide,
Yes.
not just in India.
Yes.
But I think
Uh,
you can't stop thought.
PK Jain, an important point that was raised by Madhavan and PKD also, that is that everybody is a potential broadcaster in today's times. Armed with a smartphone, you can actually do live broadcast. You can become your own camera person. You can do your own video editing. You can put out anything you want. And that puts additional pressure on the security agencies when there is a VVIP sort of a visit. And there are certain extra measures that they take. Perhaps it could be because of that they really want to ensure that proper bona fide journalists come in to cover the prime minister's visit, and that's one reason that such a measure could have been perhaps taken.
See, this increased journalism, as you said, the individual journalist is only increasing the transparency in the system. See, as far as I am concerned, when the Prime Minister is visiting, is the security aspect of it. I do not want anybody close to the Prime Minister who's not a bona fide or who's not a verified person. Now, that verified person, I said, you have seen the D in front of the PM's stage. You have seen a back area which is also sanitized. Now, this
Yeah.
sanitization is necessary. Only people who have been verified, who have been vetted, security cleared can enter those areas, because that puts the VVIP in immediate threat of to his life or his person. So it is nothing to do with any individual can cover the event when so many other 100 other journalists are covering the event. One more doesn't make a difference to us. But that 101st person also must be verified. He must be security cleared, and his equipment should be thoroughly checked. There are a number of incidents where people have
Yeah.
used the camera as a as a weapon. So everything has to be checked. So increased personal individual journalist is only transparency part of it. We have no issues on that, because if the
you
prime
know
minister is speaking something, it is out in the public, it is out in open. But
Job of.
if
Yeah.
if that person, but see, the current scenario, as you are aware, the prime minister, PFI, there was a module in Bihar who wanted to threaten the life of the prime minister. There are a whole lot of other threat inputs which are coming to the prime minister's life. So it is imperative on the part of the security forces that they take proper precautions and ensure that no threat comes to the life of the VVIP. I would
Yeah.
only just cite one
Yeah.
incident from Delhi, long ago, when Mr. Rajiv Gandhi was the prime minister, and he had gone to visit Rajghat, and there was a guy who was sitting, hiding himself in the tree for 2 days. he fired two shots on Rajiv Gandhi. Fortunately, he had a very he had a katta in his hand. That's why he could not do any constructive damage. But the additional CP who was in security of that detail and who was a distant relation of Mr. Rajiv Gandhi was under suspension for 5 years. So we must understand the implication of any lacuna in the security and the
Yes.
damage it can do to an officer's
Yes,
life.
one can imagine the job of the security agencies is not
That's right.
so easy. But that brings us to the end of our discussion. Obviously, the order that was issued has now been withdrawn, and the police has said that they will facilitate journalists to cover the Prime Minister's visit. But clearly, this was an issue that needed to be discussed. It's not something that we could have also ignored. But thanks to all of you for joining us today. That brings us to the end of our show. Thanks for watching.
Thank you, Zafar. Thank you.
It's great to see you here. Thank you for watching our work. If you haven't subscribed yet, don't forget to click the bell icon and subscribe to Mojo Story and support independent, robust journalism.